So Avatar, good to see you after a long time. How are you doing this
Same
evening?
here, same here.
You're back in your hometown after many, many years and months, I believe.
Yeah, probably this much time, probably after 2 decades.
Wow, wow. Must be a interesting feeling going back to your hometown after so.
100%, 100%. It's a it's a feeling that you get when you're back home after a
Yeah,
big war.
yes. So, Avatar, we'll wait for a couple of minutes, and we've got a few people joining us. We'll continue to wait for a couple of minutes while they join in and settle down, and then we can get started with this interesting
Sure,
discussion.
Chetan. Sure.
It,
Anytime.
it's always a pleasure to connect with you and learn from you.
Same here, same here. Always pleasure talking to you. And you always think of some interesting topics. And I'm impressed seeing your library behind.
Well, yeah,
Awesome.
I'm doing this from the office actually, so yeah,
Okay,
space and
okay.
management.
Wonderful.
Thank you for
Am I
joining us.
audible clearly?
Yes, you are, and I hope same for me.
Yes, you are pretty audible. Yeah.
Thank you. Uh, yeah, so we are at 6:33. We'll give it 2 more minutes, and then we can get going.
Sure.
Hi, Sonia ji. Thank you for joining us. Karthik, thank you. Ushab, nice to see you. So I think the last time we connected, Avatar, was probably March or April in the midst of this pandemic, and I think
Yeah, I believe.
it's been.
Yeah.
I hope the next one we do in 2021 will be sitting across from each other with a live audience, so
Hopefully.
more exciting and engaging.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Let's see what COVID has to bring to all of us.
Yeah. Let's hope we're at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. So
you can tell. Yeah.
yes, please go ahead.
You can tell me if I'm audible like this better or
Better now. Is it better now or earlier was better?
Yeah, I think this is good as well. Priya,
Okay.
welcome. Yeah. You can probably be more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So
Actually,
yeah, so we'll get started and then get going with our exciting conversation. So welcome to Pavitra. Nice to have you on our platform. We are an ecosystem for the soul. Our goal is to enlighten everyone and enhance the health, wellness, and spiritual quotient of all living beings. At Pavitra, we aim to do good as we grow our community and work with like-minded people. We work on causes that are close to us. So, for example, we are working with underprivileged women to develop product, and this is our way of giving them an empowerment and giving them a more fruitful life. Even when we source, jewelry for deities or clothing for Prabhujis or deities, our goal is to, look at some upliftment and empower people, give them skills and give them a livelihood, and at the same time grow the Pavitra community. We're also live on Instagram, Facebook, and our YouTube channel Pavitra Connect. So do follow us for all the latest updates and product launches at Pavitra. During this pandemic, we've also launched, online puja service, so to speak. We did a few during Deepavali and many other yagnas with our, empowered and enlightened spiritual leaders, as well as our panditjis who guided people through this whole program while they were at it. At Pavitra Music, which is another channel that we have, we are soon curating a program with an international artist, Gaurvani Prabhu. He's based in Washington, D.C., and he's got an amazing voice and has traveled all over the world spreading the joy of Kirtan. And we hope to do that in the first week of January in 2021. So it will be great if lots of you can join us. Today, like I said, very happy to welcome back Avatar Lila. He is a life coach, a life strategist, a motivational speaker. He's also been on the TEDx platform and has spoken at several corporates across the country. Avatar is a graduate from the IISc Bengaluru, and he went on to a fast-track career in the infotech space, working with global organizations like Honeywell and Emerson. And he just gave it all up to go find his inner self and to discover himself to learn more about life. And he joined a monastery. He was a monk for many, many years. And like we were discussing earlier, has only recently come back to his hometown. So, Avatar, how long were you a monk for?
Uh, Over a decade, almost 12 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And we'll talk more about your journey as we engage today. We're also very excited that Avatar is joining our elite panel of life coaches and mentors on Pavitra. And you can connect with him, you can engage with him. He has a brain, he has a degree from a neuro leadership, that's tough to pronounce, a neuro leadership institute where, his style of coaching allows you to, maximize your potential and your value. And he also, I think, works very closely with young adults who are 15 years and over. So, reach out to us and we'll connect you with him, and you can, really work with him and get better at lots of life challenges that come your way. Avatar, you want to tell us about this? I know you've been working during the pandemic and getting yourself this interesting degree or certification. Tell us about this and how does it help?
Actually, being from a science background, I was actually looking for something very solidly grounded in science, which can help people bring out their potential.
Right.
So there was a lot of things that I found on net and here and there, but then this was something that was deeply rooted in science, backed by deep neuroscience. So then I kind of jumped into it, and I'm actually finding how, this whole thing can actually help, not just, spanning any age group, beginning from 15 to 45, 50, it can just help you deal with yourself and bring out the better potential. Another good thing that I found was this particular methodology of coaching. It actually empowers people. It doesn't make them dependent, because many times when people go to therapist or many people go for some self-help, they generally become dependent for every small decisions and things like that. Yes. But here we actually work with the much deeper framework where we empower people to think better for themselves so that they can figure out life on their own once they have some journey with you.
Interesting. That's interesting. So, we're talking about, a topic which is not discussed often. And we all have, these days we all have our smart devices. I'm an iPhone user and I have Siri, right? And even when, sometimes I don't call upon Siri, it starts talking to me, which is kind of like our inner voice or our inner critic, it kind of comes into our head and starts talking to us without you asking for opinions. So how do we experience this, and how do you become aware of this inner voice? What's your take on this? Because sometimes I hear even myself, it criticizes you, that you're never going to be a good dad, or some other people may experience that you're never going to have friends, or you'll never be a good parent, or you're always going to fail at your job. So tell us your initial thoughts on this.
I'll tell you an anecdote. Once, and I spoke about it earlier as well. Once upon a time, a farmer lost his watch. Earlier those watches were there, which were like tick, 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 tick.
Yes.
And he called a lot of small children because it was a haystack. They were not able to figure out. A lot of children tried to find out that watch, and they all gave up. They were all exasperated. Finally, one boy came up to him and said, "Can you give me a chance?" He said, "Yes, please go ahead." He said, "I want to go all alone inside." So please go ahead. So he went all alone inside and brought the watch back in just 5 minutes. And this farmer was so amazed. He said, "How did you manage to find the watch in that huge haystack?" And he said, all I did was just kept my ear to the ground, stayed silent, and just listened to the voice from where it was coming, the tick tick sound, and just followed it."
Right.
I think a lot of times what we miss in life is not ideas or suggestions, but silence to process those ideas and suggestions. Many times we also know what we need to do. We also know what we're supposed to do. We also know where probably we are going wrong. We also know probably what we need to do, but we just miss that personal silent space for ourselves where we can process things. So I think the first thing we can probably work is, if you really want to get hold on to this, this inner voice, which is always calling us, nagging us, first is just start observing and hearing it with patience. And I think that requires a little bit of practice. And that is what popularly is, being popularly known as mindfulness.
Mindfulness, yes.
Mindfulness, literally that means you are in the moment, you are in the present, and you are willing to listen to your own inner voice that is going on and understand what is its aspirations and where is it coming from.
And I agree with you because, the kind of society and the times that we live in, if you look at, my iPhone has this thing called screen time. And when you actually at the end of the night look at the number of hours you're staring at this thing, and we're doing it even right now, right, as we speak. But the number of hours that we spend, 6 hours, 7 hours, that's probably, most of your awake time, you're just stuck to this device. And I don't think you are, like you said, you don't have time to just sit and think and process stuff, which is very important. And most of us just don't do it, I think. So why do we experience this? And is there a purpose to this inner critic or inner voice? And the other thing I want to ask you is that, is this like a manifestation of maybe a criticism or something that we've got in our past and is there in our subconscious, and then suddenly, it starts talking to us? So after you answer that, I have a follow-up to that question as well.
Sure, it's a brilliant thing. Actually, yeah, the origin of this inner voice has a lot to do how we have been brought up, what had been our initial experiences, and the way brain is wired. If I ask you, Chetan, just remember 3 very exhilarating, positive, happy moments in the last 30 years, since the time you crossed your,
Right.
were in your teenage. It
Yeah.
will be difficult to actually figure out and pinpoint, and the memories will be very, obscure or okay, here and there. But if I ask you 3 moments where you're actually sad and sullen and depressed and probably felt like laid down, those memories will be very, very strong. The way our brain functions is we magnify negativity far more than we acknowledge positivity.
Mm.
Like a simple example, if you look at a beautiful flower in a garden, it's a positive feeling that you get. But it's not that you just suddenly start running towards the flower.
Yeah.
But as soon as you see a snake next to you, it's fear, right?
Yes.
As soon as you see a snake next to you, your impulse is that you actually start running away. Your whole body actually gets into a different kind of action zone. The reason is our brain processes negativity. Our brain sees negativity far more strongly than positivity. Anything I told a little boy, a little boy, a little girl actually hears in their childhood, that goes inside their system. Like if suppose a child is growing, being constantly compared with their siblings, right? Or their cousins or things like that, then they often hear this statement, I'm not good enough, you can't do it, you're not good enough, you're not good in studies, you're not good here, you're not good there. All these amalgamation of all these negative things that we hear about ourselves start nagging us as our inner critic as we grow up.
Mm. So you think gratitude, I mean, you hear about a lot about saying that one should practice gratitude and stuff. Is that, does that help in sort of kind of, balancing out this inner critic that's going to keep hitting you? And because you said it's very, difficult to focus on the positive and, keep to, your negativity is a larger sort of space in your brain, so to speak. But does gratitude help sort of overcome this?
Yeah, so in one sense, gratitude can actually help you consciously focus on the positives in your life.
Yeah.
So that's a very good antidote. It's like you start focusing consciously on the positives in your life, and that's where you start, moving forward.
Right.
And this inner critic is basically, generally very negative in the sense. The whole thing is very, very negative. So many times we often hear ourselves, like you were articulating it so well. You said, I'm not a good dad, I won't become a good husband, and I'll be not a good businessman. Most of the time is very, very negative.
Yeah.
And majority of people don't know how to translate this negative inner chatter into something constructive positively. And that's where, all these kind of actual issues starts cropping in. But the origin of this inner critic, as we just discussed, lies in our own initial experiences. Now it could be initial of anything. Now initial of life was childhood. Imagine your initial of your work life, your first job, your first business, whatever kind of experiences you had in that becomes like a set pattern in our head. Of first relationships, right? You had first time you had a relationship with someone, and what kind of experience you get there creates a framework of how you see relationships as you move forward in life. So this inner critic is, gets formed with all these kind of experiences that we get in our life, and that's how we start envisioning the world around us.
Okay, interesting. And in some situations, this inner critic may just it may be active all the time. I mean, I don't say this in a I say this in some jest, but maybe if you look at a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, that inner critic is active 24/7, right? But on a serious note, that people who are sort of dealing with this inner critic and can't just get it out of the head, how does one, how do you deal with that? Because that can really overtake your entire thought process.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, this impact of this inner critic is very, very, what do you say, deep and strong. People get into all these kind of modes of self-guilt, where they get in the mode of self-doubt, or get in the mode of self-deprecation or self-deprecating humor that they start speaking. And these steps are actually, very legible of how you can actually come out of this inner critic. Now it's like being stuck in quicksand.
Yeah.
If you're stuck in quicksand, more you move, faster you go inside. So this inner critic has to actually start operating. You have to start dealing with this inner critic from a more peaceful domain. So the first thing is identify where is it originating from. Identify the root. Is there some sort of fear that is nagging in your subconscious, which is holding you, which is making you speak like this? Is there a kind of experience you had in your past which you are still not able to close? Right? There are certain experiences we get. We need to have a closure on those experiences. Maybe the windows are still open. Is that something which is actually making you feel that you are not good enough, you are bad, or having all kind of negative chatter, any kind of negative chatter that you have in your head actually becomes inner critic. Now, what is needed to be understood is this inner critic is not always very bad. Actually, it is the one which makes us work. It makes us actually commit deadlines. It is actually, if it is not there, we might actually become complacent and we may become a civilization which doesn't achieve anything, right? The problem is inner critic begins with good intentions,
right,
but it just doesn't know where to stop, right? So, it's like you can speak something comparative to your child. You can say, okay, you look at your cousin, how nicely they're studying. But when you start overdoing it, start penetrating it, it starts pervading all aspects of life. That's where things start becoming challenging. So this inner critic we need to understand where is the boundary, beyond which it's not healthy to be self-critical. Right.
So you need to kind of assess it, basically.
Exactly. So we need to have this understanding of how much is enough. If you get into self-deprecation too much, what happens when people are where they have heard a lot of negativity about themselves, and this is what happens in our environment. We make sure we tell someone what they're doing wrong, but often overlook what they have been doing right.
True.
Whether it is workplace, whether it is family, whether it is relationship, whether it is friends, whatever, we often make sure that they get to know what they were doing wrong, but they never get to know what they were doing right.
Yeah.
Right? That happens so many times, whether it is family, your children, or spouses. So what happens is, in this whole space where you keep hearing negative, even when you self-reflect, it is more of self-criticism than self-reflection.
Right. Absolutely right. So, even in the workplace, I think, when in the work that I do, I think if you look at, 10 wrong things, it's important to go there and give one, piece of appreciation, because then the guy is motivated to fix the stuff that he's not doing right. Because at least there's some, something to motivate the person and something to make him feel good. And he can then be more amiable to the positivity that he needs to bring into his workplace or his personal space.
Absolutely. Actually, according to research in workplace, generally people think that if I speak negative feedback or give them, people will be motivated to work. But that happens only in 1 out of 13 cases. Most of the cases, people actually get demotivated, lose the spirit to actually, work for you.
Yes.
A very simple statement. I mean, very simple thought if you actually look upon it. If you can't love the people who work for you, they won't love the work they do for you.
True.
And if the love is not there in the work that they do for you, there is no productivity, then there is micromanagement, then there is further feedbacks, and this whole loop actually starts working.
Yeah. And
so
your customer, the end result is also, at the end of the day, they're going to feel this, and that's going to lead to a sort of
100%.
Trajectory.
See, frustrated employees cannot create pleasing experience for the customers.
Absolutely not.
So that's going to percolate down everywhere, right? Like, for example, when Sam Walton started Walmart, he just had this simple phrase which guided him. He said that if I just take care of people, people will take care of me.
Yeah.
And that's what he stuck on, and that's what actually made Walmart initially grew up. And the reason why certain problems and challenges happen in Walmart at some point was because they somehow overlooked this one guiding principle which Sam Walton actually established. Right. That if I just take care of people, people will take care of me.
Nice. And to the guests that are listening to us, if you have questions, please feel free to type it in, and we'll continue to, we'll try and address them while we chat. And so how do you, when we talk about the workplace, everybody says that some decisions are best taken with your gut or your intuition. So
Absolutely.
on one side you have the inner critic that is sort of hammering you towards negativity, and then there's the gut or there's intuition, so which is kind of like the opposite of the inner critic. How does that manifest, and can you tell us a little bit about that sort of angle?
Yeah, I personally heard this story from my spiritual teacher, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, and who speaks about this biblical anecdote of the good dog and the bad dog. Right, a grandchild goes and asks his father, grandfather, and grandpa is telling the story that there's a good dog and there's a bad dog in our heart. So good dog and bad dog is like the inner critic and this inner supporter, you can say, which is there, or you can the gut feeling that we have in our heart. Now, which one will actually bark louder? The one who is fed the most, right? Now, if we are most of the time investing our energies in either criticizing ourselves or others, we are actually fueling our inner critic more and more.
Right.
But when we are spending time in even acknowledging others and finding the positives in others, we'll start finding positive in ourselves also. And this is so important. The way to self-discovery is to help others find theirs. The way to self-growth is when we actually start helping other people grow. The way to actually self-esteem is we start helping other people grow their self-esteem. That's something so phenomenal. We are all wired for generosity. As humans, we're all wired for generosity, and when we start neglecting it, we start delving into our own negativities. So I would say the way actually you make your inner voice very strong, which is that positive supporter very strong, is first of all start listening to it and start nourishing it. How do you nourish that inner voice? The kind of there are extensive things we can actually do to actually nourish that space, but one thing that I would say is the kind of exposure you give yourself to.
Right.
Just look at the kind of news we read, the kind of feed that comes on our Facebook or Instagram, or is it positive or is it negative? Is it all about problems? Is it all about scandals? Is it all about scams? Or is it about positivity? Is it about real heroism? Is it about how people are sacrificing, how people are actually going out of the way to help others? Right. What we bring in is what is going to go out.
True.
It's very clear. So if you want to make our own inner gut very strong, first of all, we also need to understand the purpose for which what I do and why I do. The purpose has to be very, very clear. If I'm not clear about what I'm doing in my life,
right,
my gut would not respond in the right direction.
And that's actually a big, that's a big one. I mean, probably we need to do another one just on that topic, because that's a real, finding your purpose in life is such a complicated question, which I don't think we can, address in its entirety today. But
sure, yeah,
that's a big one. So, like you said, you're controlling this, the inner critic versus the positive one. We had a question from Priya Mataji who asked that, how do you know it's your intuition talking to you or your critic? I mean, how do you figure that one out?
That's a good question. Actually, I'll tie it up with another question also. I thought that people generally have. How do you identify between a desire and a calling?
Okay.
How do I know that this is my purpose or that's just my ambition, that's just my desire?
Right.
So it's very simple. Actually, again, the same thing. If you are in your own silent space, that means you actually give yourself time to grow. You would know by your gut that is it your inner critic or is it your gut? See, gut is always constructive in nature, even though it is critical. The gut will always tell you how you can be better. It will not just leave you by telling how you are wrong, but it will actually guide you how you can be better, depending upon what you have decided to actually move in direction for. Inner critical, not necessarily is going to be constructive in nature.
Right.
Inner critic could just be critical and not give you positive direction to move on. But your gut would never leave you like that. It will always show you what you need to do. That's gut, right? We already know consciously that this is what I need to do. So that is, it will be pointing you to the right direction. Right? Or for example, ambitions or personal desires, they push us. But calling and purpose will pull you. The same thing. So inner critic will push you down, but this gut will actually pull you up to make you a better version of yourself. So that's how you understand that after following this voice, am I becoming better? Am I becoming more motivated? Am I becoming more self-inspired? Or am I becoming morose? Am I becoming more negative? Am I becoming more critical? Am I actually just procrastinating things? The result would actually show what was that voice.
So thank you. That's very interesting. And we have another question from Neha, and I'm going to take a couple of these and then ask you a few.
Sure.
That and she's asking that is guilt your critic or your intuition? And Neha, correct me if I didn't ask that correctly, but I think that was the question. What's
That's a beautiful thing. No, guilt is actually when your inner conscience holds the mirror in your face and the emotion that you go through. Right? We all know internally that what is right and what is wrong, but when we actually betray ourselves, I've used the word for your permission, when we betray ourselves, we have a inherent, kind of intuition that I'm doing something wrong. That's where guilt starts perpetuating, I did something wrong, I did something wrong, I did something wrong. Now, when that guilt takes you to the space where you actually become inert about making a positive change, that means you have given the baton to the inner critic.
Okay.
Who's just criticizing you, criticizing you, criticizing you, you have done wrong, you're not good for anything, you're blah, 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 blah. But if you have learned the lesson from what has happened, and that guilt has actually given you understanding of how I can move forward. So that is the intuition part. When you actually go into the self-introspective space, if it is a positive area, where you start thinking, okay, I've done this, I made this mistake, to err is human, okay, fine, where do I need to move? Like as I always say, failures just show you where you are, not where you have to be.
True.
Right? So when guilt actually comes in our life, but it actually helps us move forward and make us better version of ourselves, it's our gut, it's our intuition. Yes. But if it is actually making us worse than what we were, probably we are losing the battle to the inner critic.
So I really like that, and I really love the fact that you say guilt is when you betray yourself. I think that's quite profound. That's very. There's a couple of other questions, but I wanted to ask you something else. That you deal with a lot of young minds, and when you're 14, 15, you're developing, and your mind is obviously very active, and you're probably getting to your first relationship or a first complicated friendship, or so many things are happening, and you probably don't know more. I mean, not as evolved in figuring out this whole inner critic. So for a young person or a 15, 16-year-old boy or girl, how should they process or approach this critic, and what can they do to sort of keep it real and keep it straight?
Actually, the age group of 12 onwards, I mean, the age from 11 to 21 is the most crucial decade of everyone's life. It's the most crucial decade of everyone's life. That's like the bedrock foundation. It's like you really start interacting with the world. And what happens is a lot of time, generally in this teenage group, this age group, and it pervades everywhere, but they generally face three kind of challenges most of the time. Relationships, which is an evergreen all-time hit. Yes. Then there are habits that they actually struggle with, and then there is self-image or self-growth, or the self-esteem basically. Yes. And in all of these three cases, whether it is self-esteem, whether it is habits, whether it is relationship, a lot of wrong decisions that happen is because of negative self-talk. Mm-hmm. Right? Just think about it. If my own mind is telling me constantly, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, it will also whisper, a slight whisper in my head, which would say, bad people do bad things. Here you go. Yeah. There are some nice temptations and addictions and whatever. Why don't you try? Anyways, you're so bad. What's the point? The world has already rejected you. Everyone has rejected you. No one loves you. So better as well self-destruct yourself. It actually begins with the negative self-talk. Right? So behaviors, what we see out the outside is like the tip of the iceberg. Right. But the rock bottom of the iceberg is actually the thinking of the person. Yes. Right? And unless you correct the thinking of the person, unless you correct the inner chatter of that person, what is thinking, what is talking to himself, you can't change the behavior of the person. You can't change the behavior of the person. So for teenagers, for teenagers, I think committing more to this inner negative self-talk, and there are a lot of reasons why that happened and why is it increasing in this day and age, but that leads to a lot of complications in their personal lives.
So, I mean, I'm sure there are parents listening in as well, and I'm also a parent. But what can you said that you want to look at what they are thinking and try and change their thinking. But, this is inner critic, and obviously the child or the young teen may not want to discuss. How can one sort of, nudge or influence that positivity in their thought process without really being too invasive? Any advice for that?
Yeah, that's great actually. The first thing is the person who is trying to help them should come from a very non-judgmental space. And many times that happens when you have your own stakes involved in that individual, in that process, that we are actually very, what do you say, impulsive to give suggestions, to correct course and sabotage the thinking of that individual, right? Like if you look at sports, many times the coaches are brought from outside the country.
Yeah.
Many times, because they can be very, very objective and non-judgmental. They have nothing to lose or hide, or whatever, no stakes involved.
Right.
So sometimes if parents are playing that role, you have to use that cap all the time.
Which is very
See,
difficult.
if I'm being a parent at one point, being disciplined, how will that guy trust me to open up in that, he would be actually feeling very vulnerable. What if this information is misused against me later on?
Yeah, true.
Right? So maybe within the parents, probably the roles are divided. One is more disciplinary, but one is more friendly. Right. Where the way you actually maintain that disposition towards them, then they're very happy and comfortable opening up. This is a very interesting phenomenon that I also observe amongst teenagers, and I just get shocked. Here's a 16-year-old boy who has been living with his family, with his parents, and he's not talking about what they're going through. And he meets me first time, and within 10 minutes, he tells me everything that he has not spoken to their parents. Right. And I wonder, why is he telling me this? Because he doesn't even know me. Because he knows that he can be vulnerable here. Because he has nothing to lose or gain, because I just come from an objective, platform.
And there's no judgment.
So I think absolutely. So if parents have to play that role, they have to actually maintain and gain the trust of individuals by consistent behavior. Hey guy, I'm there for you, and I'm not going to misuse this information you're going to tell me. If you tell me that you had a crush in the college on this on this girl, I'm not going to tell your mom. And that has to be like we maintain that level of trust between that relationship for that opening up to happen.
It's quite a challenge. So I'm going to there's a few questions from people listening in that. Would it be good to say that since subconsciously the inner critic is always at work, it's better to channelize it to improve the self?
Yes. That's the best. I mean, if you can channelize it on your own, or if you need someone externally to help you channelize it, do that. Right? Do that. And that precisely happened in the Gita, right? Krishna was the perfect coach, actually, right? He just improved the thinking of Arjun. He did not provide a solution or anything like that. He didn't make the situation easy for him. He made him strong to deal with the situation. And that's what coaches are supposed to do. That is what, as life mentors, we're supposed to do. Make the person strong to deal with the challenges, not make the situations necessarily easy for them, right? So if your inner critic is talking all kind of things, try to use it in a constructive manner. And that happens a lot when you actually practice some sort of, personal journaling or some sort of mindful practice where you can start observing the situation from a third person's perspective, right? When you start, when you are actually, this is how our inner critic actually talks about it. Always talks about the first person. I'm so bad, I'm this, I'm that. But if you actually just start talking the third person, okay, maybe he's not able to do this well, he may not be able to do this well, then you realize this inner critic is actually just opinions, not judgments.
Yeah.
These are just opinions which have been created. And when we start operating from that space, this inner critic's voice, if you just take it objectively and not attach emotions too much with it, you may be able to work with those suggestions to become a better version of themselves.
Right.
Because one thing is, inner critic is there to actually save us from embarrassment, save us from emotional hurt. And that's why it keeps protecting us. Just that it doesn't know where to stop. So if you can use that inner critic positively, it's actually wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's the only way. I mean, we can't get bogged down, and we can't have our actions influenced by negativity that our inner critic sort of bestows on us, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Geeta asks that apart from watching external factors to see which dog you are feeling, when you spoke about that example, what to do to start truly loving yourself?
The simplest thing that we can actually start doing to start loving ourselves is start acknowledging what is going right in your life, first of all. One of the things that we often do about self-reflection is, if I ask any random person, please tell me about your life, most of the time, maybe 9 out of 10 times, they will actually start talking about what's going wrong.
Yeah.
What's going bad? Where did I mess up? I'm saying just change the dialogue to start talking about what went right in my life.
Right.
Right? Instead of, it's like, can a small 1 rupee coin, close the, eclipse the sun? Probably not. But if I hold that 1 rupee coin too close to my eye, I can blind myself to the sun as well.
Yes.
Sometimes in our life, problems are there. We're not denying them.
Right.
We have done mistakes. We have slipped. We have done all of those stuff. But when we hold them too close, we're not able to see the potential that exists.
Right.
I'm just saying that when we actually start self-acknowledging ourselves, self-appreciating ourselves, fulfill your needs, give yourself space and time. Even a well in villages cannot give you perennial waters unless it replenishes itself with its own inner sources. Right? We are in the mode of, suppose someone is a housewife or a mother or a father or whatever, they're always in the mode of giving, because that's what we have been, groomed up to think, that love means just giving, but you can't just keep giving unless you're also receiving.
Yes.
So you need to have your own personal practices, your personal time, either talking to someone you trust, either reading a wisdom book, practicing some sort of meditation, practicing some sort of spirituality, which is bona fide. That would actually replenish ourselves. That's what would empower us to keep giving. So in order to just self-care for ourselves, I would say, start acknowledging yourself and start investing in yourself. That's what will actually build us on.
Great. Thank you for that. And, I also, when you spoke about, dealing with problems, there was a book that I read by an author called Mark Manson, who said that life is a series of problems, but you have to enjoy that journey of fixing this one and then moving on to the next, because you can't get bogged down. So similar to maybe the inner critic, it's always going to be there, but you can't let it sort of, overtake your thoughts and overtake your actions and let it lead your life, so to speak.
Chetan, this was such a nice thought, actually. Many times we ascribe happiness as, if I say happy, somebody has a happy life. So it's not just about always happy is all smiles, right? Yeah. Imagine a mother, imagine a lady who has just become a mother with a small child, and it's not easy to take care of that small child. If you ask that mother, she would have stress, she would have anxiety, she would be tired, exhausted, worried. But if you ask her overall, are you happy? She would say, of course I'm happy, because of the child. Yeah. So the situation in our life is, we don't become happy with what we have. We actually become happy with what we do with what we have.
Nice.
Right?
Amazing. Yes.
And happiness is a bigger, package. It will have all emotions in it. Don't deny them, embrace them, accept them, because that's what life is. And start enjoying the process and not just the destination.
Absolutely.
When we become destination focused, we are either success or failure. Either it is 0 or 1, right? Either we achieve it or we don't achieve it. But when we fall in love with the process, yes, then it's okay even if we don't reach it, but because we are growing through the process.
Right.
And many times people focus on the prospect of becoming great and not the process of becoming great. Nice. And that's where the problem actually lies a lot of times.
And yeah, the destination is, temporary, because once you've achieved something, then you move on to the next one. But the process is the longer one. So if you're happier doing the process, you're probably better off in life, because, you won't be as stuck up on the end goal, like you mentioned.
100%.
Yeah. And I think, we have a limited time, because Instagram doesn't allow us to chat forever, which is up to with you, because it's so amazing always. But another question that comes up is, can sometimes seeing only positivity make you live in denial? I mean, you can't just be over, for lack of a better word, overly happy or whatever. I don't know.
Absolutely. This realistic optimism is so very crucial in life. Once an admiral was asked, who was actually a prisoner of war in the Vietnam War, and he was later on asked that, who are the kind of people who could not make out of the camps? Right? Who are the people who could not make out of the camps? And he said, the people who were optimists. And optimism, when it actually blinds you to reality, optimism is not bad. Optimism is not bad. But if that actually makes you blind to reality, it's fatal. It's fatal. People who could not come out of the camps were those people who kept thinking, oh, we'll get out by December, we'll get out by April, we'll get out by June, we'll get out by December. And they just somehow perished in those concentration camps. So we have to have optimism. We have to have hope. But at the same time, we also need to be active and perform our responsibility and duty well in that situation, right? Hope has to come once I've done my part. Okay, this is what I was supposed to do. This is what I'm, in our Vedic terminology, we have karma and we have daiva, right? So we have to perform our activities, and then whatever, we are hopeful that it will lead to positive results.
Yeah.
But just hoping and not doing anything about it, I think sometimes it can be very, very fatal.
And another one is that, let's say you have these faults, and some of these, some of the criticisms may be actually genuine. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but how does one
Sure.
how does one course correct, or what can one do to sort of take that criticism? Okay, maybe what this is could be correct. How do you fix that, or how do you try and overcome that?
This is so interesting, Chetan. This is so interesting. Actually, when people talk to us or we talk to people, people don't respond to what we say. People respond to how are we being towards them when we say what we say.
Very interesting.
Right? I'll repeat that. People don't respond to what we say, but they respond to how we are being towards them when we say what we say.
Okay.
Like our mothers probably chastised us, our mothers probably corrected us, but they also loved us. Right? They also loved us. So you have to be very careful. If that criticism is coming from a person who really wants you to grow, that criticism will actually help you grow. Right? But if that criticism is coming from the space of just negativity and a person who is not bothered with your growth and progress, be watchful. If you can pick up the objectivity and see the silver lining in the dark clouds, great. But if it is bogging you down, maintain distance from that negative person. Don't have to subject yourself to.
They're probably reflecting their negativity or issues that they are facing by being just critical of you, maybe.
It's like a boxer in the ring. He gets boxed down, right? He doesn't look at his opponent for a hopeful suggestion. Will I be able to get up? The opponent will say, no, I'll pin you down again. He looks at his coach because he wants him to grow. And that coach will actually tell him, hey, you did this move wrong and that move wrong. Make sure you actually have something, better in place to win the game, right? So if you are hearing criticism in your life, pause, reflect, understand what is being said and not necessarily who is saying that. Many times when criticism comes, we are often focused on the deliverer, then the content of what is being said. And in that whole emotional space, we are not able to actually really work on what has been said. We often get into that defense phase. How can he say that? How can she say that? No, what rights do they have? All that kind of, and then we just lose the capacity to self-improve ourselves.
Absolutely. So there's another question from Priya. Then is that not what destiny is? I don't know, was that or what comment that was alluded to, but maybe Priya, if you can type in the chat box, we could get to that. And Avatar, last question, I think, because we will get cut off on Instagram at some point, and we'll continue, hopefully have you back very, very soon, because it's always amazing to
always there.
So dealing with this, more constructively, you've done sort of a degree on mapping the brain, etc. Is there like a scientific, is there a science that, okay, do 1, 2, 3, or is there like a scientific process to sort of overcoming this inner critic or dealing with it constructively?
100%. There are actually, it depends upon who is actually helping you leverage on your thinking.
Okay.
We can actually, when we have conversations, when we think, generally we actually, think on 5 different levels. Somebody can think on the level of vision. Somebody can think on the level of planning. Somebody thinks on the level of details. Somebody thinks on the level of problem. And somebody is just on the level of emotional drama, right? So when you are in the level of emotional drama, when you're just talking about problem, you will never be able to solve it. You will never be able to solve it, right? You have to elevate your thinking to the level of planning, thinking, visioning, all that kind of stuff. So how does that happen? How does my, level of thinking actually rises? Through constructive conversations.
Okay.
Right? What do I expose myself to and whom I talk to? Any kind of sound that I'm actually exposing myself to, right? Like traditionally people have this concept of chanting mantras, right? What exactly was that? They were actually exposing themselves to some sort of coded positive vibration, right? So when we talk to people who are positively inspired, when we talk to people who have the capacity to lift our conversations up, right? that's where actually we start thinking constructively. Our brain starts changing because of neuroplasticity. The brain starts changing. Our thought processes start changing. We start pursuing the same thing differently, right? And I always say this, quality of your life depends on the quality of your conversations. Simple. You may be living in a palace or you may be living under a tree, but your quality of life will depend upon what is the quality of your conversation with others and with yourself. And I think this is something so very important in this world today, to improve the quality of our conversations these days, the quality of our thinking these days.
So I
And
think,
I think that's the best possible science.
yes, and I think that's a great, way to end today's conversation. The fact that you said that the quality of your conversation will depend or will matter and will reflect on the quality of your life. So I think, that's a great way of even overcoming your inner critic, having, more quality, positive conversations with yourself, and mindfulness, like you mentioned, and obviously engaging with people who are more positive and more constructive. So I'd like to thank you once again, Avatar, for coming on our platform and gracing us with those amazing thoughts and visions. And I think we can all, look forward to the next one that we do with you. Like I said, hopefully in person. And if anyone would like to connect with Avatar, please get in touch with us, and we will facilitate that discussion for you. And I'm sure you'll come off even more enlightened. So thank you very much. Have a Pavitra evening, and look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chetan. Thank you, everyone else.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.